Before we begin, Rachel, are you there? Do I see Rachel? Rachel Guerra Cordero de Lorenzo will offer an invocation and land acknowledgement. Thank you, Rachel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making time to come out. Before we start anything, I just wanted to offer some thanks to the indigenous peoples whose land we are on, and ask for a call to action that in any way you are able to give back to the indigenous people who once stewarded your land and who probably continue to steward your land. And I come to this area, to Manhattan, with a prayer for my Pueblo people in the Southwest. You don't have to stand if you don't want to, but if you have a hat, I ask if you could just remove it for a second. Wemisha Naya Naishtia Gatsana Gubishtaya, Teayu Tawanya, Tikana Tumate Drutsesha, Mayuna, Shrota, Tawak Hanukat Ganisha, Tawak Tayu Ganisha, Tawan Naishpi Ganisha, Tashkawan Zutse, Bama Zutziwe, Zutu Trashe, Wishtiani, Winataani, Shrutuni, Hinowach, Amua Tramani, Tinyao Tramani, Bashrua Tramani, Iani, Zutranisha, Bawastrami, Benati, Bet Dawatrani, Heya, Washkanawana, Don Daku, Dape, Ticket Dixtil, Botil, Satil, Ster, Na, Tsukataka Shashoni. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome everyone to the ALBA Puffin Human Rights Awards ceremony. My name is Maria Hernandez Ojeda, and I'm Vice Chair at ALBA. This is our 13th year giving out the award, and we are so pleased to honor this inspirational organization, Indigenous Women Rising. You will hear more from them soon. This cash award of $100,000 would not be possible without the generous support of the Puffin Foundation, represented here today by their president, Neil Rosenstein, who is here with his wife, Sabine, and Eileen Richmond, also from the Puffin Foundation. Thank you and welcome. We're very excited to gather with all of you in person after 3 years of celebrating online and to be united here at La Nacional, the historical headquarters of ALBA in 14th Street. Founded in 1868, it is the oldest Spanish cultural institution in the US, and as a Spaniard, myself, I am honored to be here. Now, I would like to acknowledge the ALBA board members in attendance today, and if you could please stand or wave. Julia, Daniel, can you wave? Joe, Nancy, Josie, thank you. And as you can see, our filmmaking colleague, board member Peter Miller, is recording this event to share with others later. Thank you, Peter. Of course, we are all incredibly grateful to the wonderful ALBA staff who worked incessantly to create this award ceremony. Mark Wallem, Dennis Mini, Marina Mihashlova, and Cole Estalon. Thank you all for everything you do, Mark. And our chair, Sebastian Faber, sends his greetings to everyone here. Unfortunately, he could not be with us today due to a death in the family. A special guest is Iago Magni Conde. Iago, where are you? Over there, okay. Iago is a sophomore in high school, and he wrote a radio play about the Spanish Civil War featuring 2 vets in combat during the war. Just last month, his play won the statewide competition for the National History Day contest, and we're thrilled that he's here with his mother, Dr. Susana Martinez Conde. Iago, can you please stand? Thank you, Iago. So, ALBA preserves the legacy of the Lincoln Brigade as an inspiration for all generations. And as we look toward the future to continue ALBA's mission, it's important to remember those who are no longer with us. In recent years, when we were unable to meet, ALBA lost many good friends, and we'd like to observe a moment of silence for them. These friends include Perry Rosenstein, Harry Belafonte, Bruce Barthel, Jim Skillman, James Polshek, Manus O'Riordan, Freda Tanz, Corinne Thornton, Gwendolyn Hall, and Andrea Sender. But before we begin a moment of silence, I would like to ask you for the names of other ALBA friends who should be honored, if you have someone that I may have forgotten. No? Okay, well, thank you. So now, please join me in a moment of silence to honor our absent friends. Thank you. We have a wonderful program for you that includes a panel session with Rachel Guerra Cordero de Lorenzo, June Gibson, and Patrick Ricards, led by Jack Meyerhofer. And now, I would like to call to the stage David Parsard and Nancy Wallach. David is a former student of mine at Hunter College, where he studied the Spanish Civil War, and he's now a doctoral candidate at Brown University, completing a dissertation on medieval literature. David would pay tribute to the Native American vets. And Nancy Wallach is our beloved colleague on the ALBA board and the daughter of the Lincoln Brigade veteran, Hy Wallach. She will pay tribute to Ruth Davy Dow. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. Good afternoon and thank you for attending. During the Spanish Civil War, almost 40,000 men and women from 52 different countries, including 2,800 Americans, volunteered to travel to Spain and to join the international brigades to help fight fascism. The United States volunteers that served came to be known collectively as the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. They include individuals from all over the country, as well as from the Caribbean. There were sizable contingents of Jewish, Latino, African American volunteers, among many others. Native Americans were also counted among those who went to Spain to fight fascism and protect Spain's democratic republic. Before we begin, to be clear, this presentation and all the research into the composition of the brigade is still a work in progress. There may well have been more members of the brigade that identified as Native Americans, but the individuals included in this presentation have sufficient primary source evidence to prove both their ancestry and their participation. The presentation will provide, through vignettes, a look into some of the lives of Native American volunteers. Oscar Henry Hunter was born in Orange, New Jersey on May 22, 1908. His mother, Lillian Hunter, was Native American. At 14, he hitchhiked to Detroit, expecting to get a job in the auto industry. Along the way, however, in Cleveland, a local black family who helped him get a job as a window washer in a department store took him in. A supervisor at the store, also a black man, noticed that Hunter spent his spare time reading and offered to help him return to school. Oscar then attended the Hampton Institute in Virginia for 5 years. It was at Hampton, he says, that he became a radical. This was due in part to the influence of a Bible teacher who gave Hunter books on socialism. In 1931, Hunter went to West Virginia State College on a football scholarship. The following year, he attended Brookwood Labor College, a school for labor organizers run by the radical Protestant minister A.J. Must. There, Hunter joined the Communist Party. In 1932, Hunter became an organizer for the party, working first in New York and then transferring to Chicago, where he was involved in the party's drive to organize stockyard workers. At the same time, he also studied journalism at Northwestern University. Hunter volunteered to join the International Brigades in 1936. He then applied for a passport stating that he intended to study at the London School of Economics, the same thing he also told his family. Hunter departed then for Europe aboard the Paris on January 16, 1937. In Spain, Hunter first served with the Lincoln Battalion's Tom Mooney Machine Gun Company. Wounded later in action at Jarama, Hunter was sent to the American hospital in Murcia, ran by Dr. Edward Barsky. Eventually, Hunter became a political commissar for the hospital, responsible for the morale of English-speaking patients. He worked diligently at the task and was transferred to Barcelona as commissar of an international auto park. In the fall then of 1938, Hunter was sent back to the United States to arrange hospital space and care for returning wounded volunteers. He arrived on September 21, 1938, also aboard the Ile-de-France. In Chicago, Hunter helped organize the veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and resumed his political activities. Eventually, the party informed him that because of his political activities, he was in danger of being arrested and that he should leave town. Hunter then moved to New York, where he developed his own printmaking process and, together with his wife, started his own business producing hand-painted wallpapers. During the 1950s, the FBI also harassed Hunter. One of Hunter's brothers would not speak to him for many years because he had been frightened by FBI questioning. Hunter eventually left the Communist Party in the early 50s, but also during the 50s, he was active in anti-Vietnam War protests and neighborhood issues around his co-op building in New York City. In his last years, Hunter served as National Secretary of the ALBA and was one of the founders of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives. Hunter would die in New York on January 1, 1983. Frank Alexander, however, is one of our more unique cases. Although not Native American by birth, Alexander was born and lived on the Omaha Sioux Indian Reservation in Nebraska, becoming immersed in the Sioux culture. His family lived there because Native Americans were more accepting of his parents' mixed-race marriage. Alexander's mother, Ella Ray Speaks, was white, and his father, Mark Alexander, a cowboy who had ridden for the Pony Express, was black. After the death of his mother, Alexander stayed briefly with his younger brother, Herschel, who had become involved in the Industrial Workers of the World and was living in the home of the famed communist leader, Mother Bloor. He then moved to Los Angeles, where he found lodging in the Young Communist League flophouse. Alexander supported himself by selling chickens from a truck and also by working various construction jobs. He became a communist in 1931 and through the party met some Hollywood personalities, including John Steinbeck and Joan Crawford, who were also involved in its activities. Alexander would sail for France aboard the Georgic on June 12, 1937. In Spain, he was assigned to the Washington Battalion, but soon contracted pneumonia and was hospitalized. During the fighting then at Teruel, Alexander and his squad were ordered on a reconnaissance patrol near the enemy's lines, but were caught in the open and cut down by long-range gunfire. Alexander was the only man to survive back to friendly lines. He was with the MacPaps when they crossed the Ebro during the Republic's last offensive in July of 1938. However, he was wounded shortly after the offensive began and spent the remainder of his time in a Spanish hospital. Due to the severity of his wounds, Alexander was left behind when the other Americans were withdrawn. He finally crossed the Pyrenees together with thousands of Spanish refugees, and alongside them was imprisoned by French authorities in a hastily constructed concentration camp. He spent several weeks there until a U.S. Embassy official arranged his passage to the United States. He finally returned to the U.S. on March 3, 1939, aboard the Manhattan. Alexander returned to Los Angeles, where he found employment as a welder. Later during World War II, Alexander enlisted in the U.S. Army, returning home in December 1945. After the war, Alexander then became a full-time Communist Party functionary from 1948 until 1955. He also chaired the Negro Commission of the Los Angeles Communist Party and was a member of the California State Committee. During the McCarthy period, Alexander endured constant surveillance and harassment. He was indicted as one of the Los Angeles 21, a group of Communist Party members charged with conspiracy. The charges against Alexander were subsequently dropped, but not before he had a short jail term. Both Alexander and his wife resigned from the Communist Party following the Soviet invasion of Hungary in 1956. In the years that followed, he built a successful business as a contractor and a hardware store owner. Alexander would later die on April 15, 1996, in Seattle, Washington. In closing, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for your time and for letting us share these important stories with you. If you have any questions on the presentation or on the research, I would ask that you please direct them to the ALBA staff. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Dennis Meany for writing the words that I'm about to share with you in tribute to Ruth Davidow. Ruth Davidow was born on September 1st, 1911, in Poland. Her family shortly after immigrated to the U.S., settling in Brooklyn, New York. Her father was Joseph Davidow, and her mother was Maria Hertzman. Davidow says she inherited the radical politics of her mother, who, after fleeing Tsarist Russia in 1917, threw herself and her family into the vibrant Jewish leftist scene of Brooklyn and the Lower East Side. A seamstress and leader in the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, her mother brought her daughter to rallies and sold the communist newspaper, The Daily Worker, door to door. Davidow thought of becoming a lawyer, but had to leave school as a teenager when her father was diagnosed with tuberculosis. To support her family, she enrolled in nursing school at the Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, which, along with Beth Israel, trained many of the nurses who served in Spain with the American Medical Bureau. For Davidow, it seems, the experience of nursing proved just as radicalizing as her days with her mother on the picket line. She ran health programs for Brooklyn's poor and was active in the hospital's unionization efforts. In a 1989 interview, she said that it was during her nursing training that, quote, she truly began to learn how important it is to engage in politics. I felt it part of a long chain of what happens every day, unquote. Despite her political radicalism, Davidow said that at first she did not comprehend that the events in Germany and Italy and Spain were connected. Only after Davidow began to engage in debates at groups like the Committee to Aid Spanish Democracy did she see that the events in Spain, Italy, and Germany made up a greater conflict. Davidow likely joined the Communist Party before early 1937, connecting herself with the left-wing institutions that would propel her involvement with the Spanish Civil War and the Lincoln Battalion. In June 1937, she set sail for Spain. The U.S. government, maintaining its travel ban, had threatened to confiscate the passports of Americans attempting to travel to Spain. Volunteers from all over the U.S. disguised themselves as students or as buyers for merchants of overseas wine or cheese and made roundabout journeys through France to reach the embattled Spanish Republic. Davidow and her peers in the American Medical Bureau worked in excavated caves, abandoned factories, tunnels, and converted churches. They endured shortages of food, water, and electricity. Many suffered from malnutrition. Some contracted diseases like malaria and pneumonia, and others were wounded by gunfire. Among many postings, she served as a nurse at Pozo Blanco Hospital on the Cordoba front, and during the Ebro offensive served with a Spanish Republican surgical team during the heavy fighting there. Davidow returned to the U.S. on December 1st, 1938, aboard the Queen Mary. The Republic would fall the following year. Davidow, like many of her fellow nurses, went on to have a lifelong career of activism, organizing in Havana with the Public Health Organization from 1960 to 1961, traveling to Mississippi to aid the Freedom Riders in 1965, joining the Native American occupation of Alcatraz from 1969 to 71, and founding a health clinic in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district to provide support to drug addicts in the 1980s. Ruth's varied work in these distinct but interconnected social movements shows the intersectionality at the heart of her politics and that of American anti-fascism itself. She died in 1999 in San Francisco, California, at the age of 87. We would quickly like to give our audience here a brief reminder of one seminal event in our country's history Ruth was involved in, and that is the occupation of Alcatraz Island. On November 20th, 1969, a dramatic event took place in California that focused attention on Native American grievances. On that day, more than 70 Native Americans gathered before dawn on a dock in San Francisco Bay. They boarded 3 boats and sailed from the small foggy harbor to Alcatraz Island with the intent to occupy it. They called themselves Indians of all tribes and issued a proclamation: "We hold the rock." Previous attempts to occupy the island had been made by Native American activists who cited provisions in the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, which said that unused federal lands could be open to claims by Native Americans. Alcatraz had been categorized as surplus land by the United States government, sitting unused since the prison there was closed in 1963. After the San Francisco American Indian Center had burned down and the community needed a new place to gather, the idea of another occupation was put forward. The rock, they thought, would make a perfect replacement for the destroyed Indian Center. The occupiers in subsequent communications offered to buy Alcatraz in glass beads and red cloth, the price paid for Manhattan Island over 300 years earlier. Once the occupiers had established themselves on the island, organization began immediately. An elected council was put into place, and everyone on the island had a job: security, sanitation, daycare, school, housing, cooking, and laundry, and all decisions were made by unanimous consent of the people. Occupiers taught traditional native arts and crafts such as bead and leather work, wood carving, costume decoration, sculpture, dance, and music. The population of the island grew as other Native activists beyond the original contingent traveled to the island. Although federal marshals eventually removed the protesters and their demands, including title to the island and the construction of a Native American university, and they were never granted, scholars view the 2-year protest as a springboard for much modern-day Native American activism. And as we said previously, Ruth was one of the few non-Native peoples involved in the occupation where she gave occupiers medical treatment, once again illustrating the web of social movements that made up the left and Ruth's life. As a closing statement, we are happy to play for you this clip from ALBA board member Julia Newman's film, Into the Fire, as a parting word from Ruth herself.
And it was a wonderful experience. And they're part of you here, part of Spain. I'm happy to be here, and I know that the future belongs to you, and you'll do better than we did.
Hello everyone, my name is Jack Meyerhofer, and I am a board member of ALBA since 2020, and I'm the chair of the Human Rights Committee. And it's really so nice to be here and see some new faces, some familiar faces in 3D, because really up to this point it's only been through Zoom for a lot of my fellow board members, so it's so nice to see everyone in person. I was speaking about how this is a really special event for a number of reasons. One being that in previous years, we would have the Human Rights Award would be part of a gala, of another event of which it was a part. This is really special for us because this is the first time that we're doing a separate standalone event for the Human Rights Award, and it's really amazing to have an event where we can focus just on that, to have not only this year's winner, but also previous year's winners to come be here with us in person. It's really, I think we're extremely lucky for the panel that we're about to have. So now we're going to invite some of our current and previous winners to come up, and we're going to have a discussion, hopefully an informal conversation for the next 30 or 40 minutes. And I will ask some questions. I hope that our panelists will ask each other questions as well. And then, of course, we'll open it up to all of you for some Q&A. So to get started, we'd like to invite the co-founder and executive director of this year's recipient of the Human Rights Award, Rachel Lorenzo. Rachel, please join me in welcoming Rachel. The what? Okay, perfect. Rachel is the co-founder and executive director of Indigenous Women Rising. And Indigenous Women Rising is committed to honoring Native and Indigenous peoples' inherent right to equitable and culturally safe options through accessible health education, resources, and advocacy. And we are really thrilled to have Rachel up here to speak with us. So, Rachel, could we start off with just asking, could you tell us a little bit about Indigenous Women Rising? Why did you co-found it? And what's the background and history of Indigenous Women Rising?
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited and honored to be here. I started Indigenous Women Rising because I needed an abortion in an emergency. And in abortion politics, it seems as though when you are facing a health crisis, that abortion is more palatable at that point. And I don't share my abortion story to make abortion more palatable, but rather to show that there are a variety of reasons why people need abortion care. And growing up on the Pueblo of Laguna Reservation, growing up very Catholic, I'm also Mescalero, Apache, and Chicana, and all of those identities include anti-abortion rhetoric, and again, growing up very Catholic. And I didn't grow up with my cousins or my grandmas or my aunties talking about abortion or even talking about healthy sexual consensual relationships, or the things that happen when you are pregnant, like, sorry to get a little TMI, but the fact that when you continue a pregnancy, you get a ton of yeast infections, or any of the different things that happen to your body that you might have never experienced before, or no one could have prepared you for, because I know that that was my experience. And so I just really wanted, after my abortion, I just really wanted community. And it started off as looking for aunties and grandmas. And then it just ballooned into something I could have never imagined.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love, you speaking about it was community, in fact, that was what you were looking for in the beginning. And that's really, from what we know of Indigenous Women Rising, community is a huge component of that. Can you speak a little bit about Indigenous Women Rising's work today?
Yeah, in 2017, we had we got our first ever grant. It was $10,000 from the Kellogg Foundation, and it was to participate in a hackathon called Make the Breast Pump Not Suck. And yeah. And for some of you tech folks, if you know what a hackathon is, you think of like Silicon Valley, dude bros who like create apps, right? No, this was a huge group of people who were really interested in maternal mortality and how we could lessen the number of people giving birth and their babies dying. And so our project was to reimagine our traditional regalia to be more breastfeeding friendly. And from there, as we got press coverage, I started getting DMs asking if I could help other Native folks get an abortion or if I could give them an abortion. And so I had just graduated from graduate school, and so using my knowledge about insurance companies to help these folks navigate their insurance. And then I realized, oh, it's much bigger than that. I have to also share what I know about Indian health services and the difference between what states will allow insurance companies to cover or not cover, what Indian health services will and won't cover, and then the discovery of the Hyde Amendment. And having to communicate those things to people who are seeking abortion care in states where it is so hard, and it takes a long time because a lot of states have waiting periods, just to get basic health care, and have to travel really far to get basic health care, and not just abortion care either. So then the abortion fund was launched in 2018, and that's when my cousin Cole, right here in the audience, my co-founder, yes, Cole answered my call on Facebook. I was like, I can pay for your snacks and your entry if you can like volunteer to do or to like take down names and emails. And now we have a fully functional abortion fund with 2 staff. We have our emergence fund, which is our midwifery fund getting off the ground, where now we can fund Native people all over the country who are wanting a midwife, a doula, who are looking to do placenta encapsulation, or who want ceremony after they have their baby. We give out menstrual hygiene products at all of the events that we table at. We were just at Gathering of Nations and the Najoni Days powwow in Albuquerque. And we gave out almost our entire stock of condoms, reusable pads, breast or lactation pads, our menstrual cups, and it just proved to us once again how needed our services are, because our community trusts us and tells us that that's what they need.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I appreciate you two also expanding on and explaining how, while abortion access is an important part of your work, Indigenous Women Rising is also providing comprehensive health care, of which that's a component. I think that this then is a perfect time right now to invite our other 2 panelists up to join us. So with that, I'd like to now invite Patrick Rickards and Dr. June Gibson. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. And I just want to begin by thanking our partners from My Brother's Keeper and from Life After Hate and the full team for coming and joining us and traveling to New York. Just to provide a very brief introduction, Dr. June Gibson is the president and CEO of My Brother's Keeper, and My Brother's Keeper was the 2021 recipient of the ALBA Puffin Human Rights Award. My Brother's Keeper is an organization whose mission is to reduce health disparities throughout the United States by enhancing the health and well-being of minority and marginalized populations through leadership in public and community health practices, collaboration, and partnerships. We are also joined by our friends at Life After Hate, Patrick Rickards, who's the CEO of Life After Hate, which is an organization committed to helping people leave the violent far right to connect with humanity and lead compassionate lives. Their vision is a world that allows people to change and contribute to society without violence. And Life After Hate was last year's recipient of the ALBA Puffin Human Rights Award. So thank you, all 3 of you, so much for joining us. Like I said, I think we're so lucky to have such incredible human rights activists up here. I'd like to begin maybe with our 2021 recipient, Dr. June. Could you tell us a little bit about the great work that My Brother's Keeper is doing?
So we're in Mississippi, and My Brother's Keeper is a community-based organization that does a wealth of services and training, prevention, outreach. But in 2013, we opened Open Arms Healthcare Center, which became the first and only LGBT primary healthcare clinic in the state of Mississippi. Yeah, so imagine that. I would have to say probably absolutely one of the scariest things I've ever done. You got to think about, we're already black, then LGBT, then you add women on top of it. So we're like the minorities of the minorities. But it was something that had to happen. We could not do it. Healthcare was changing, community-based organizations was changing. We got PrEP, so many things that were happening that we felt like the community needed something more from us. And so from that day, we have expanded. We have telehealth. We have other satellite locations. We have a statewide mobile clinic that's 2 exam rooms, expanded waiting room that goes statewide, providing our service called the Becoming a Healthier You. And it's called the BHU for short. But with that exam is glucose, cholesterol, BMI, blood pressure, HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, Hep C and Hep B for free. So you get all these screenings, and it's a great introduction into healthcare. It gives you all those pieces. It gives you your reproductive health, but it also gives you your chronic. So you get to know who you are for free, and then we invite you into the services. And over the years, you've been able to grow that actual exam. We can mail that to your home. You can do all that you can prick your finger, send it back, and we can give you your results. So we have grown so much over the years, and it is a love that I can't even explain it sometimes. It's just an immense love for what we're able to do, who we're able to help, and to be able to see the differences that takes place within the community when you pour into the community. They pour back into you.
It's incredible work that My Brother's Keeper is doing. It really is, and having the chance to hear more about it directly from you is really such a privilege. Patrick, could I ask you to share with us a little bit about the great work that Life After Hate is doing, and maybe also similarly, what was the creation story? Why was it created?
Sure. Well, Life After Hate was originally created about 12 years ago. And the intent was you had individuals who themselves have been part of violent right-wing extremist groups. For whatever reason, usually because they were getting out of prison or they had a major event in their lives, they decided they needed to leave that life. They didn't know how to do it. They got themselves out. And they thought, wouldn't it be great to create an organization that could help others do what we did? And so for the first 10.5 years of our existence, it was largely that sort of peer network. You had sort of very unofficial individuals helping other individuals. And over the last 2 years, we really had to dramatically change our approach. Because as we've realized, those who are looking to get out of violent right-wing groups and online hate spaces, it's far more complicated, it's far messier than it ever was. And it's one of those, when you look at when Life After Hate was started, if most of us were thinking 10, 15, 20 years ago about right-wing extremism, you're largely thinking about white power groups. You're thinking about groups that largely were anti-black. What we've seen now is you have a flavor of hate in this country for anybody who wants to hate. You can be anti-black, you can be anti-woman, you can be anti-Semitic, you can be anti-immigrant, you can be anti-undocumented immigrant, anti-native, anti-Muslim, anti-Islamist, anti-government, goes on and on. And so that's forced us to change the way we do things, where we've had to bring in licensed psychologists, we've had to bring in licensed social workers who work with each of our individuals. We've provided a lot of that hands-on support to get them out of these hate spaces. And for the average client of ours, it takes about 18 to 24 months to do it. We've also, though, had to do a lot to really invest in public engagement. How do we help family and loved ones, who are the largest source of our clients, understand what to do with an individual? What do you do when somebody has hit that rock bottom? What do you do when their ideology is starting to soften? How do you engage in a way that is not condemning them, but is helping them get where they need to go? And so, as I said, this is not an easy process. We sort of practice 2 key beliefs. The first is that we believe in compassion with accountability. We get a lot of requests. We've helped thousands of people over the life of the organization get out of these lives of violent hate. We don't have time for individuals who aren't willing to invest in the process. We don't have time for those who are going through the motions. And I say that in that we are now that we are in our post-January 6th, now that we are in our post-Charlottesville world, we now take court-mandated cases. But we need people who are committed to do that. So they have to take accountability for their actions. If they do, we will show them the necessary compassion to rebuild their lives, to become productive members of society. But at the end of the day, what becomes most important, I think it's true not just for those who are part of the violent far right, but for any of us. None of us want to be judged by what was our worst day. None of us want to be judged by what was our worst action. And so that means that, again, if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to earn the trust, if you're willing to try to not just disengage from these right-wing spaces, but de-radicalize your thinking and want to re-engage into our civil society in a productive way, we are able to help. It's not an easy path. For many of our formers, they feel the need to prove themselves day after day after day. They recognize what they did to their fellow men and women. They recognize what they did to their communities. And they're constantly trying to prove that they are worthy of our redemption. And so our work is to try to help them get there.
Thank you so much for that, Patrick. As I mentioned, Life After Hate was last year's ALBA Puffin recipient. And unfortunately, we've seen the growing need, and it was always there, and it's become even more, I think, on the surface and obvious, the need for the work that Life After Hate is doing. So we'll open it up to the audience for Q&A in just a moment, but I wanted to take advantage of holding the microphone right now, maybe to ask one of my questions, which was, we at ALBA, and on behalf of the ALBA Puffin Award, we're really genuinely so honored to have the chance to work with you. And for us, looking at the work of your organizations, I think there are some obvious parallels, for example, with regard to healthcare, for sure. But from our perspective at ALBA, and certainly in the Human Rights Committee, we see all of you as doing absolutely essential work in terms of human rights and protecting and promoting human rights. So in your work, you've been doing this work now for some time. How have you seen the challenges to your work evolving? So Patrick, and even in your last answer, you were addressing this a little bit, but if you've seen them, how have you seen the challenges or the threats to the human rights that you're protecting evolving? And sorry, I guess this might be a two-parter. One is, how are you seeing those challenges? How has the need for your work changed or adapted? And then second, on hopefully a happier note, what have you seen successful? What have you seen be helpful in addressing those challenges, in responding to those challenges? So Rachel, maybe could I ask you to start?
Sure. The challenges, honestly, aren't necessarily from legislators across the country or the Supreme Court. It's actually our own people. It's actually our own tribal government leadership. 75% of federally recognized tribes in this country are led by men. And in New Mexico, where we are based, our 19 pueblos, in our part of the country, our colonizers were the Spanish. And a lot of our Pueblo tribes held on to Spanish forms of government and had taken on, there is an incorporation of Catholicism, and it's a hard thing sometimes for us to reconcile many of our grandmas and grandpas, our aunties, being very devout Catholics and having these views about LGBTQ folks, about our own trans and non-binary relatives, when our own traditions, our language acknowledges the existence of trans and non-binary and gender-expansive relatives. And how some of even our traditional charis words, charis is what the English term for our Pueblo language at Laguna and our sister Pueblo, Acoma Pueblo, that there are words that describe trans folks that are weaponized to make fun of young boys who are seen as more feminine, and just how disheartening it is. And so what we've done is be as intentional as possible as bringing cisgender heterosexual men into the fold, into the work that we do in educating them, because those are essentially the future leaders of our tribes, even though it's not traditionally how it's supposed to be. And so what we've done is try to figure out how we can get our own men to care and to prioritize reproductive and sexual health, and work with us with our legislators at the state and the federal level to protect not just abortion access, but really prioritize the well-being of pregnant people and of young people who are exploring their sexuality and might need guidance. We have the highest suicide rates in what we call Indian country than any other group in this country. And we have an epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous people. And that is absolutely something that we should all be caring about because, again, it's not just about abortion, it's about our ability to make decisions about how we create families and making sure that our children, our aunties, and our moms are able to come home.
Thank you so much for that. And also, I think for everything that you said, but also helping us understand better how this isn't just a Supreme Court issue. That is not the only thing, and I think that often is what the conversation is about, or is what you see in the media. So I really appreciate you expanding that and helping us understand.
Yeah, I will say, because to get to that second part about some of the good things, this morning we had an interview for a potential board member. And we asked one of the questions we asked was, what do you see us doing really well? And she was talking about how she can trace back conversations that are happening in her community at Isleta Pueblo, which is just south of Albuquerque. She can trace those conversations back to when she started learning about Indigenous Women Rising and how we have our org, our loud and bombastic org and full of queer folks have made an impact on her family having conversations about sexual health. And to me, that's what the most important is that the matriarchs in our community are seeing themselves in the work that we do, and they're taking it on and making it into their own thing.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Dr. June.
When I think about challenges, it really boils down to, is it ever going to end? Is it ever going to stop? You have legislatures, that's always going to be a thing that happens. But I don't think there's always people rationalizing when you make decisions about health care, when you decide to stop something, don't support something, you leave us at a deficit. Mind you, we wake up every day thinking about HIV and STDs. We wake up every day thinking about primary health care. But then along comes COVID. So mind you, you're trying to prevent something that we want to do every day, then a pandemic hits. And just when I caught my breath from COVID, monkeypox. So now I have another, it just keeps going. Health is a constant thing. It doesn't have a stop point, a barrier point. It's always going to happen. So when something is constantly happening to you, and then you have the powers that be that actually seek out ways to make it harder for you to do public health, it's the public's health. It's all of our health. We have to invest in the public's health, or it will ruin us all. We have to have these things. So the challenge is that health is never going to stop. It's always going to happen. And then I have, on the other end, people, Texas, getting rid of preventive care. How do you say that you don't want to do preventive care? How do you say that STD is not a priority? What in your mind says that if we allow this country to not deal with the public's health, that things are going to be okay? We've been there before. We've had the Black Plague. We've had the Spanish flu. We've had things that let us know that the public's health has to be a priority for us all. So that's my biggest challenge, is that it's an ever-energized, it just never stops. And you can't catch your breath sometimes. But the successes come with that. With everything, it's a give and take. I think of all the successes, it's going to be, people like you, it's going to be ALBA, it's going to be Puffin, it's going to be people who recognize us for what we're doing, that believe in us for what we're doing. I've gotten more money, but I've never been given money for waking up in the morning. Never been given money for just what we normally do. No one ever recognizes us for us just caring about people and wanting to be better, and want people around us to be better. So my success is when I get to say, we got a Human Rights Award. And I get to tell other funders that this is who we are now. We are someone that people are recognizing us across the country, and not because I wrote a 30-page grant, not because I stayed within the guidelines. Someone saw us and said, you know what, you all are deserving of this because what you're doing is great. And I cried that day because it was so emotional to really just be appreciated for who you are.
I'm so glad to hear that. And as someone who's written way too many 30-page grants, I totally get it. And I'm really, really happy to hear that it had that effect, because that's what we're hoping it will do. Patrick, would love to hear from you.
Well, I think our greatest challenge is the changing population. I think to most, even today, when we think of right-wing extremist groups, we think of things like the movie American History X. We think of males with shaved heads and white power tattoos and combat boots that are in the streets. And unfortunately, that's not the audience today. When I went through sort of all the flavors of hate, the one thing we know from all of the active violent right-wing extremist groups and all of the violent hate spaces today is they are all misogynist and they are all anti-Semitic. But that said, when I can tell you about our clients, how do you address these sorts of issues when you realize that almost half of your clients are women who were living in a misogynist world and thriving off of it and parroting the same language? How do you provide these sorts of services to individuals who are Latino, who are Black, who are gay, who are Native? And we have clients in all of those buckets. You think of this in terms of just white power, but that's not who we're dealing with. We're dealing with as diverse a clientele as we have in this country. And so that requires a very different approach than, say, 5 or 10 years ago. And it's why we've had to make a lot of the changes that we've made. And I think when we look at the successes, I can look to these two incredible people next to me. And the reason why they are successful is because they have a passion for the work that they are doing. They know their North Star. And they have the knowledge, the training, the education to do the work. And that is, when I look at Life After Hate, I'm most proud over the last 18 months of our ability to address that third part. As I said, we've brought on licensed psychologists, we've brought on licensed social workers who work alongside our peer specialists, those who are the extremists themselves, who can demonstrate there is nothing unique about somebody who's trying to exit a life of extremism. But we've realized in very short order we need both sides of that coin. It's not sufficient in this sort of work. This is incredibly messy, and I think it's true of human rights in general. It's not sufficient to simply intend to do good. We need those individuals who are experts in their own fields. We need those individuals who have had the knowledge, the training, the ability to deliver on the promise. Otherwise, you go through a period where you're making a lot of promises that you're not delivering on. And I am incredibly proud that in the last year, we are now finally delivering on everything we are promising.
Yeah, I think that deserves a round of applause. Well, I have plenty of questions and things I'm interested in, but I don't want to monopolize the microphone. So at this point, we'd love to open it up to the audience for Q&A. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask our panelists.
As a daughter of an Abraham Lincoln vet, we are aging out. Nancy, Dan, you can look at us. We're not going to be here. Yeah. And we need your help. And thanks to the Puffins, we have this wonderful award to give to a younger generation of groups to continue in the spirit of the vets. They went to Spain to fight for a legally elected government. And just as you are fighting for legitimate reasons. Now, as a committee, the Human Rights Committee, we ask in May and June for suggestions for what we should look at. Most of you will answer probably the biggest problem in the world is climate change. Well, we decided as a committee that even King Charles is interested in climate change. So we want to take it down a notch. 3 years ago, I thought it would be reproductive rights. The rest of the we got responses from ALBA, and the people weren't interested in that at that point. Last year, after the Supreme Court decision, the ALBA group changed its voice, and we worked on women's reproductive rights. We were always interested in Native American rights, but this year we were able to find a group that met both domains. We're asking you now to please consider what you consider the next most important thing we should look at as a committee to find out. Now, if you were to ask me right now, I would say it would probably be immigration and homelessness. But we need we need input, and we also need suggestions of small groups where the bang for the buck will be greater. We don't look for major groups. So if you have any ideas, don't hesitate to send something to Dennis, because he will coordinate the information for us. Now, I started tributing Jack, and he deserves a lot of tribute, because last year, you can't imagine the amount of research he did to get us together to choose you as a group, Rachel. We really, and Jack did a wonderful job. And this year we will probably move on and do an equally great job. Not to demean you, Gina, at all, because she's a really major investigator. But we need your help. So if you have any ideas, send it to Dennis, and as a committee, we'll respond, and we'll think about, we'll take it, we'll put it in the hopper and reflect on it.
Thank you so much for that, Joe. I think, again, as the chair, I love already taking advantage of the moment right now to see if you can help our committee work. That's great. Thank you very much for that, Joe. We still have a couple of minutes. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask of the panelists? We've got Gina in the back.
Hi. I would like to hear from each of these wonderful organizations. Your words have brought tears to my eyes. This is the first time we've brought our human rights recipients together in this format, and it just gives you hope in a time when there's a lot of despair. And aside from, hitting my phone and PayPal and sending you, $25 a month, what can we do? What's the message that you would send to this group today about how we can help you continue to make a difference and have an impact?
Thank you for that, Gina. I would say hosting fundraisers, if we're talking about money, hosting one for us, and getting creative. We have an excellent pie baker in the Bay Area who did a teach-in with her classmates and talked about the true history of Thanksgiving, and raffled off pies for us. So it just takes a little bit of creativity. Not just us as an org, I really want y'all to make an investment of time and resources in your local indigenous communities. For example, in California, the state had banned traditional use of controlled burns or controlled fires, right? And then we saw a huge uptick in uncontrollable wildfires in California that displaced thousands of people. And then the state of California went back to these indigenous groups and said, hey, can you help us? And they did, and those groups did. And so I just want to share that as one example of how meaningful it is to invite the original stewards of wherever you call home to take leadership in your community and give up just a little bit of your political or social capital to uplift our knowledge, because it is truly indigenous people who make up a small percentage that protects about 80% of the world's ecosystems. And so climate change is absolutely something that that can be addressed, and even at the community level. So that's what I would offer, is just seeing what's in your who are your indigenous neighbors.
I would really like for the room to help me with the narrative. I mean, we're not lying. When I say that things happen to me as a Black person, I'm not lying. I'm not making it up. I'm not looking for sympathy, but I'm not making it up. And I think that there's this overwhelming idea that we're just creating things and race and putting race in front of it to say that this has happened to us, but it's not really true. We're not lying. The LGBT community, they're not lying. Everything that we say that happens to us, how we are treated, how we are followed, how we are policed, whatever it may be, we're not lying. And I would love that if you can do anything for me, help us with the narrative that as minorities, as women, for people to understand it's happening to us every day, all day, and we're not lying.
I get a question a lot in terms of whether those people that we serve are worth our time, our effort, and our money. And the answer I often give is if you do not believe that you can help violent extremists disengage and de-radicalize, think about what the alternative is as they drive deeper and deeper into the movements. And so one of the ways that we are addressing it, which is I think everybody can help us with, is in the early days of Life After Hate, we would get countless calls from, particularly post-Charlottesville, countless calls from the media, from documentarians, from academic researchers, who essentially, the term I would use, wants us to practice in trauma porn. They want us to give them former extremists who are going to bare their souls and open the wounds and discuss the worst part of their lives so that people in a room can judge them and essentially say, oh, thank goodness I'm not as bad off as they ever were. We've done away with that in the last year at Life After Hate. What we do now is we are telling those stories through a productive, respectful narrative. So we've begun to create counter-narrative videos where you're hearing from former extremists talking about their experiences, what drove them in, why they stayed, why they left, what's life like for them now that they've left these movements. We just last week launched a new podcast called The Daily Former, which is intended to demonstrate to those who are currently active in extremist movements that there are pathways out, that there are individuals who have had the same experience as they did. There's nothing unique about them, that there is that pathway. And so simply sharing that, both for those who are either in these movements, I'm assuming the folks in this room don't have a whole lot of friends that are probably in violent extremist movements, but you'd be surprised sometimes about women, wives, girlfriends, mothers who are almost embarrassed to talk about their children. But I think the more we can share these stories, the more we can demonstrate, one, that these individuals are not monsters unworthy of redemption, and two, one can successfully leave these movements and become productive members of our civil society.
It's really been an honor, genuinely, to sit here with you and get to hear about your work. And I hope all of us are, from those of us that work in other human rights organizations, taking this and learning from this. I know I am. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to come back to a comment that Rachel was making in terms of supporting the original people from where you are. And I just wanted to, I was speaking with Rachel about this yesterday, and the organization where I work, we've really had a great partnership with the Lenape Center, which is an organization that advocates on behalf of members of the Lenape community, the original inhabitants of where we are now in New York. And so for anyone who's curious about taking up what Rachel said, please look into the Lenape Center, come and find me after. There's a lot of opportunities for how you can figure out how you can contribute to that and support that work. So with that, I'd like to say thank you again very much to the three of you for joining, and I'd also like to ask Cole, Angela, and Brandon just to raise your hands so we can also honor you for joining us. These are our friends and partners from My Brother's Keeper and from Indigenous Women Rising. So please join me one more time in thanking my great panelists and for all the work they do. We've been so truly honored to be able to work with these incredible organizations. None of it would be possible if it weren't for the incredible partnership and support that ALBA has been so lucky to receive for many years from the Puffin Foundation. It's because of the Puffin Foundation that we are able to award the ALBA Puffin Human Rights Award, and we're able to support these incredible activists that you just heard from. So I just want to extend another thank you, very heartfelt, to the Puffin Foundation for giving us the opportunity to do this. It's really incredibly meaningful. So please join me in just thanking the Puffin Foundation. And the good news is, you'll now get the opportunity to hear directly from Neil Rosenstein. Neil Rosenstein is the president of the Puffin Foundation and government reform coordinator at New York Public Interest Research Group. Neil's been involved with the Puffin Foundation since its inception. He helped oversee the foundation's grant programs, including Puffin's major initiatives in the fields of journalism and civic engagement, its annual funding of hundreds of artists and art organizations, and the implementation of Puffin's many projects. He also remains committed to supporting Puffin's local community, Teaneck, where Neil also serves as treasurer of the board of the Teaneck Creek Conservancy. As a Brooklyn native, he met his wife Sabine atop a volcano in Sumatra, and they are the parents of two absolutely perfect kids. Neil also remains an accomplished juggler, which I understand we're going to have a performance of later today. Having performed at rallies, festivals, and street corners across the world. So please join me in welcoming Neil to the stage, and thank you one more time.
Thanks very much. On behalf of Gladys Rosenstein and the Puffin Foundation, I'm pleased to be presenting also in person and meeting in person the winners of this year's ALBA Puffin Human Rights Prize for Human Rights Activism. But first, I gotta recognize the extraordinary panel discussion we just had, and thank June with My Brother's Keeper and Patrick with Life After Hate for learning and being able to recognize a little bit more about their really important and fantastic work. So thanks very much. And as you just heard, and I think you've got an idea and an example, this award recognizes and encourages individuals or groups whose efforts have a positive advancement impact and or defensive impact on human rights. And every year, the folks at ALBA and Puffin, we wrestle over who should receive it. And we think about, is there an issue or a topic as well that's particularly of meriting attention? And this year, we did feel it was vital to address the increasing threats and restrictions to women's reproductive health rights here in the US, while also recognizing at the same time the historical and disparate impact on identity and class that these decisions had. And Indigenous Women Rising was our unanimous choice. We were particularly impressed with their culturally sensitive education efforts, their commitment to help families pay for and access abortion and other reproductive health rights, and IWR stood out for its work that has only increased in importance since we first announced them as winners of this year's award. The court's deplorable Dobbs decision that stripped away federal privacy and reproductive rights is yet another horrifying setback for those seeking to manage their own bodies and health. But the impact of such decisions has always fallen hardest on marginalized communities. The genocidal and the racist policies over the past 500 years of colonial history in North America had a devastating impact on indigenous peoples. And unfortunately, Bob Dylan notwithstanding, the times are not a-changing fast enough. And indeed, since the Dobbs decision and the hateful rhetoric we've seen on the rise, things are getting a bit worse. And it always seems to be, whether in states or courts or in public opinion, that impact falls most heavily on BIPOC and low-income communities in particular. So that current climate makes the work of Indigenous Women Rising all the more impactful and important to support. We're sure the monetary recognition of the award will be put to very good use, and we're honored to be presenting this year's ALBA Puffin Award to them for their targeted, meaningful work that honors the inherent health rights of Native and Indigenous peoples. We also, of course, meet today in remembrance and recognition of the vets who fought against fascism abroad. And this year's award recognizes the work of an organization dedicated to protecting the rights of the marginalized here at home. And we're fortunate to have the folks we just saw and the individuals who make up Indigenous Women Rising working for a better present and a better future, really, for us all. And I'm really pleased to call up, I guess, Rachel from Indigenous Women Rising and the ALBA folks to present this year's award. Thanks.
Hello again. I brought up my cousin because I want to share this space with them. I couldn't do this without my community, without my people. I started IWR because I needed abortion care. I was once again dehumanized by the healthcare system, and I know I'm not the only one. I'm not the first, nor am I the last. Since 1492, our ability to make decisions about creating families have been stripped away. Whether it was ripping children from a mother's arms or assaulting women and forcibly creating a new political class through rape and genocide, our survival as Indigenous people is a reproductive justice issue. While not everyone in our community agrees with abortion, one thing is clear. Our decisions are ours to make, and all we ask for is support, love, and respect. After the Dobbs decision last year, Indigenous people were suddenly seen as the potential saviors of abortion access by mostly white people. The concept of sovereignty was thrown about in the media and online, and I will say it was very hurtful to read that non-natives absolutely understand the concept of sovereignty. But now that a legal decision made at the federal level, made by a government with a bloody legacy of enslavement and slaughter, now impacts white women, and our land is once again seen as a haven to skirt the law for the benefit of non-Indigenous people. Reproductive justice and freedom just isn't about health. It's about our stewardship of this land and the water, every living thing, and all of the natural structures. We, no matter our race or ethnic background, depend on Indigenous worldviews to survive. Today is one step towards our reclamation of our body and land sovereignty by making an investment in our leadership to steward our health for each other. I cannot thank ALBA and Puffin enough for this award. I see similarities in our movement for reproductive freedom and the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. We are willing to do what is required of us to fight fascism. In 1936, about 40,000 people from across the globe went to Spain to fight fascism the best way they knew how. Today, we have state and local governments using the tenets of fascism to control the reproduction of certain groups. Fascism in the realm of reproductive health is not new. What is new, and what I can commit to, is that IWR will continue our work with the spirit of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, because unfortunately, our work is becoming even more violent. And just like this brigade, we will do what it requires of us to fight back, no matter the cost. Thank you.
Yat Esh and Nicole Martin in the Shed Tachini Nisha Kiesani Bashachi Chija Dashache Kiesani Dashanella. Hello everyone, I introduce myself in Dinepazad, which is the Navajo language. And when we introduce ourselves, it's recognizing the ancestors that are still here, and also bringing in our ancestors that walk behind us everywhere we go. So that's bringing in our community for us. So I just want to say thank you for seeing us. Me and Rachel started this, or when we launched the abortion fund, as Rachel had mentioned, is because our tribal governments, our state and our federal governments aren't providing the kind of health care that we need. and that we're tired of having to go to places, whether it's a hospital facility or the United Nations, to tell them that, you know, we're human beings and we deserve to live healthy, happy lives. Not at each other's expense either, because we're not going to see the kind of liberation or change at each other's expense. We have to do it together as community. And at Indigenous Women Rising, being able to take what we've done on a state, a national, international level within a short time span just goes to prove when you invest in the communities that do the work, you see the change. And while it's not the kind of change that we would like, we're kind of more of like burn it all down kind of people. And restart over, but the reality is that Dobbs was, or the Dobbs case, right, it shows that we never really had that autonomy to our own bodies. As Indigenous people, as Black people, as people who migrate, people with disabilities, the youth. But now we have an opportunity to build a healthcare system for us, by us. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for investing in us. I also brought stickers if y'all want to buy stickers. So yeah, just thank you, and may you receive many blessings in return.
We're very happy to be presenting this award as well as a plaque. And it reads, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives and the Puffin Foundation Limited proudly grant 13th ALBA Puffin Award for Human Rights Activism, Indigenous Women Rising. In recognition of their work to ensure Indigenous peoples' inherent right to equitable and culturally safe health options through abortion access, health education, and advocacy. Given here today.
13's my lucky number. My birthday is on the 13th. My husband's birthday is on the 13th. Both my kids' due dates were the 13th. So it was meant to be. Thank you so much, everybody.
And, you know, this is the first time we've been able to get here in person for a while for this ceremony. So we also have plaque and awards for previous winners of the prize. And Patrick, perhaps you want to come up for Life After Hate? For Life After Hate, in recognition of their work to help people leave the violent far right to connect with humanity and lead compassionate lives. And I guess that means June, you might be up next. One more. For the ALBA Puffin Award for Human Rights Activism to my brother's keeper. In recognition of their work to reduce health disparities by enhancing the health and well-being of minority and marginalized populations.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you, everyone who participated in the ceremony, and all of you for attending. This has been very emotional. Gina and I just shared how, we couldn't hold our tears. This has been incredible. And we are inspired by the work that these organizations do every day to fight injustice, hate, and oppression. And in preserving the legacy of the Lincoln Brigade, ALBA continues to work for its mission, teaching history, inspiring activism, and upholding human rights. So if you wish to donate to ALBA, if you wish to collaborate, there is a QR in your card, in the program card, and you can talk to anybody in the back, any ALBA staff members, and there's also some merchandise promotion. So now, please join us at the reception, and let's just enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
I got a call at 6 in the morning Mountain Time, and I was like, why are you calling me so early? And it didn't sink in. It still hasn't sunk in, and it's been months. So I'm still processing what it means to receive this award. It makes it possible for us to make a deeper investment in work that we really wanted to get off the ground, because we don't just do abortion access work. We do a full spectrum of reproductive health things for our communities, and this will just make it more possible for us to uplift the fact that we also really care about maternal health and infant health and pleasure-inclusive sexual education. In different ways, our people have always been fighting some form of fascism. We might not have called it fascism at the time, but we've always been fighting it. And this is just a continuation of that in the 21st century. And, like I said in my remarks earlier, we have been very open about wanting to fight fascism. And I think that aligns with what ALBA, the spirit of ALBA and why it was started, and recognizing the sacrifice that the veterans made to keep democracy. And even though history says they lost, I don't think that. I think that they set a precedent for young people in the future to continue to fight fascism.
At Indigenous Women Rising, we are led by our core values, and one of our core values is to be a good relative. And so the work that we do shows that, this is how we should destigmatize, this is how we should provide compassion and care for one another. As mentioned earlier, the pandemic shifted a lot of things, and it showed where our state, tribal, and federal governments lack that compassion, right, to actually take care of their citizens and their people. So we created this because we were kind of like the outcasts, even within our own community. But we realized that we want to leave a better future for the generations to come after us and not be complacent in white supremacy. I have 2 small children, and they were planned, and I'm so grateful that I'm able to have children. And it made me even more pro-abortion and even more anti-fascist. And for me personally, it just means being able to live out my values and being able to build a network with ALBA and the Puffin Foundation to continue what I care about the most, and that's leaving the land and the space that I occupy better than how I found it.
Thanks to ALBA and Puffin, this has really helped us transform our organization. It's allowed us to bring a new level of professionalism to our staff, really make sure that we're investing in our team and their well-being. But it's also allowed us to launch 2 new initiatives. We just launched last week a new podcast called The Daily Former, which helps us hear the voices of those both in the movement and those who have left, experts and those who are knowledgeable, to really share those stories so people know that they're not alone. What it's also allowing us to do, though, is we're now starting a new initiative to focus on American veterans, really making sure, we forget that for the last 20-some years, We have been training U.S. military personnel to hunt and kill Islamists. When they come back to the United States, there's no deprogramming there. There's no working with them in terms of providing mental health services to get away from that. And so we want to make sure we're doing what we can for our country and for our armed services personnel to make sure they're getting the services, they're getting the supports they need before they get in too deep. I wish that more people in this country understood about the Abraham Lincoln Brigades, understood about what Americans did to fight fascism around the globe. And I think when we look at our work, we use the term fascism in this country to describe just about everything without understanding its true meaning. And so much of what we are doing is we're working with individuals who have been part of organizations that adopt a fascist philosophy. And so we're literally working, what can we do to help them disengage? What can we do to help them de-radicalize? What can we do to ensure that they see that a path toward fascism is not the path this country has to take? That requires a lot of education. But I think that, the beliefs that the first members of those brigades held are still beliefs that we need to have in this country. There are some things that we just simply can't stand for. There are some things we have to fight against. And that's part of what Life After Hate is committed to. The best phrase is it brings a tear to your eye when you realize what legacy you're a part of. Our staff, the team at Life After Hate is small but mighty. They do the work because this is something they believe in. This is something they are passionate about. They believe they can make a difference despite the threats to their person. And so, when we look at this work and we look at how we're continuing the mission that ALBA has put forward, it really warms our hearts. It makes us realize that, no matter what's happened in the past, we're doing the right thing. Our mission is the right thing. Being recognized by ALBA and Puffin, I think, is an indication that no matter how challenging, no matter how messy, no matter how ugly this work gets, it is essential to the future of our civil society. It's essential to our representative democracy.